Folks, we're live. It's late, folks. It's 1:20 a.m., but let me just make sure YouTube's working. Oh, there we go, folks. We're all up and running. AI. I feel like there's something missing from. I mean, there has to be. It's such a huge area. Something missing from the coverage that I've been looking at, which is mostly about RAM prices and GPU prices and power consumption, stuff like that. Is AI sentient? Some silly questions like that. And are we all going to lose our jobs? I feel like these commentators have failed to really analyze it in a philosophical way by going back and sort of, I don't want to get into epistemology, but, characterizing the value of information in some way. And looking at it from the perspective of capitalism, which is to say through Marxist economic theory, which I'm not an expert in, but it's a description of capitalism, basically, which is a correct description. So it's a good place to start. And I guess that's where we'll start. If that's a good place to start, let's start there. Yeah, so I think what Marxist economic theory says is that as machinery becomes more advanced, profit begins to fall. Now, I heard a great commentator talk about this, not in the context of AI, but just in general. And that was Alex Mackay on the Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Mao Institute channel. Great channel, by the way. And the reason for this is very simple. Profit comes from excess labor value, surplus labor. So as you have fewer employees, you have fewer man hours and therefore less profit. And so we're also we're gonna make an assumption, and this, we might come back to this. Let's call it a proposition rather than an assumption. And that is that the labor theory of value holds true until such time as we say it doesn't. So labor theory of value says that it's the human, emphasis on human labor that goes into something which determines its value. Now, it has to be a reproducible product. So it doesn't apply to works of art, original works of art. It does apply to prints and photocopies and stuff, but not original works of art. I would argue it also doesn't apply to items of high rarity, like what's a really rare element, like palladium or something, right? Other Marxists might disagree with that. So the labor theory of value, I forgot to check if says that as AI is used to create products, the value of the products goes down. It's just, sorry, I just got to check something here. YouTube Studio. The value of the products goes down. So if price tracks value, which it doesn't necessarily do, but that's just, okay, well, that's good. If price tracks with value, then the price of the product comes down. Okay, so this is, now you can sort of start to see how profits can decline. So, and labor theory of value has generally, to my knowledge, been proven time and time again throughout various sort of technology upgrades over the decades. For over 150 years now. So what does this look like? As someone who used to work in R&D, you could say something like, well, you can sack some of your R&D workers because you can just use AI to generate research reports, literature reviews, for example. A lit review is not based on lab work that you do. It's based on reading shit on the internet and in books. So, notionally, you could get AI to do that for you instead of paying an employee. So that drives down the cost of innovation, assuming that AI is cheaper than an employee. But it also makes the product of the innovation lower because there's less human labor that went into producing it. Again, assuming that R&D counts as labor, which is it's a proposition. I don't know if it's completely true, but let's just assume that it is for now. So if profit tends to come down, what does this mean for AI being widely employed by capitalist enterprises? How does capitalism extract the money from people that it wants so badly? If you look at Australia, we have something of a socialized workplace, minimum wage, although some Marxists say that's a bad thing. And they have some legitimate points there. But we have a minimum wage, 40-hour working week, 5-day working week, very stringent health and safety conditions, sick leave and maternity leave and holiday leave and decent number of public holidays. So we kind of have, we do have socialism in the workplace. This is why capitalism clings so strongly to the other areas of the economy. The housing market, for example. They'll never give up the housing market because it's one of their best methods for extracting surplus labor from workers in the form of rent, interest rate payments, I should say, overpriced land and houses, excessive construction costs, fees and charges associated with building, all that kind of stuff. But if they lose the workplace and they start to lose profit elsewhere as AI takes over, how do they make up? Because the whole point of what they're doing is to make profit. And I don't have the answer. This is a genuine thinking out loud stream. But what I'm wondering is if AI leads to inflation see, this is where the labor theory of value starts to. This is the problem, because labor theory of value says you should get cheaper goods, right, after AI, if AI is indeed a technical innovation. Cheaper goods means deflation, right? On the other hand, price doesn't necessarily track with value in the real world. You know, your yogurt at the supermarket, if it goes one day past the use by date, it might go from $3 a tub to 50 cents a tub, because they discount it. Even though yogurt is, it's kind of already spoiled. That's the whole point of yogurt. It's still going to be okay one day after the use by date. Yet it's selling for a stupidly low price that doesn't reflect its value. It doesn't reflect the labor that went into producing it. So price doesn't always track with value. And, scalpers can move in on certain things. We saw that with PlayStation 5. Funny example. And other things as well. And you can get some really crazy price action. Maybe there's a scarcity element related to that. So, all right, we've got the labor theory of value pushing prices down. But we might have market manipulation by monopolies, for example, to push prices up. We might see increased monopolization somehow. I don't know exactly what the mechanism for that would be. But generally, as technology improves, you tend to get increased monopolization as it becomes harder for smaller, less technically developed companies or whoever, individuals, to compete. It's always been the way. There used to be people basically set up aircraft manufacturing. A couple of guys would start an aircraft company way back in the early days. You try doing that now, you can't even really make a lot of the components, because, like if you're trying to make a car, you got to have airbags. You think you can make an airbag? You can't make an airbag. You don't have the technology. You don't have technology for all the sensors and stuff, all the electronics, the radar, whatever, the radios. Like, as technology improves, the people who have the technology start to dominate. So if AI is a technology, those who have control of it should start to take over. I don't know what that really looks like, because it's not like it's directly manufacturing. But yeah, it is interesting, from a consulting perspective, like the work that I used to do. I remember I got this email from someone I was consulting for, and they said, I ran this through AI, and AI says it's sort of blah, 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 blah. And I was kind of annoyed, because it was something that I was going to send through. I just hadn't done it yet. Just one of those things I hadn't got around to, like some kind of specific data. And I said, okay, I'll bear that in mind, and I'll go and do whatever else I was working on. But I was a bit pissed, and the guy was kind of pretty cagey, pretty smart guy that I was working for, and I kind of felt like maybe that was his way of saying, look, we can do your job with AI. Which I didn't really give a shit about, because I don't allow myself to get manipulated like that. At least I try not to. I'm not that desperate. But, well, in the end, like, the data turned out to be wrong because it was just comparing two sets of data where the experiment wasn't done in the same way. So it's like if you're going to compare the boiling point of water with the boiling point of ethanol, and one experiment was done at high elevation and one experiment was done at low elevation, it's not a fair comparison. So it was really quite similar to that. And I eventually, because I had to get the numbers again with something else, I didn't trust that. I just I never trusted the AI thing. I didn't want to like tear it apart for diplomatic reasons at the time, but I went to the sources and found, maybe different sources to the AI, but I found apples for apples comparisons, like both chemicals in both situations, and yeah, it's about 100 times difference in the value of the variable of these chemicals, depending on how it was measured. And that's right, because the guy, I sent that through and it's like, wait, this is the opposite order of what I thought it was. I'm like, yeah, that's because, because of this and this. Anyway, so where was I? AI, yeah, monopolies, consulting. So if AI like can take over in some ways work that involves searching the internet for information and drafting any document for which there's effectively a template available on the internet. For example, the Tasmanian government is using AI to draft legislation. So they don't have to pay a lawyer to do it. I mean, someone has to use the AI, and it's still going to go through a lawyer's hands or a legally trained person. But AI can look at all of the acts of parliament and kind of see how they're put together, see the language used, which is actually very bad a lot of the time. So it's arguably counterproductive for legislation to be drafted like this. But okay, so now, they don't need to hire as many legal advisors. People going to court, AI is potentially fantastic if you're going to court. Lawyers, actually, especially some lawyers, but especially judges, are about the most articulate people you'll ever meet. They have the best language skills of anyone I've ever met in the English-speaking world. I know that because I've read a lot of their judgments, and I've also been to court quite a few times. So this is the highest use of the English language, is by Supreme Court judges who used to be lawyers at one point, or barristers. So where was I going with that? I completely forget. But anyway, AI for use in court, because a lot of people don't have good communication skills. And it's easy to put forward a compelling statement if your communication skills are very good, either written or verbal. So you might be trying to say something about the importance of due process, but you can't quite get the words together to make it sound important. But AI can do it for you, although you probably have to be somewhat literate to get the prompts going and to understand what the AI is generating. And that's actually an issue, because a lot of people in court as defendants have pretty poor literacy and computer illiteracy. So, but anyway, just saying. Just exploring like how AI can become a source of monopolization. Now, can it? Okay, so anything that involves information, collating information, generating reports or statements based on that information, there's the potential for AI to take over. Like, you can imagine someone sets up an AI paralegal law firm, right? So they can't call themselves lawyers because they don't have whatever that's called. They're not on the bar or whatever it is. But they can potentially charge like a tenth of the price of a lawyer, prepare a whole bunch of like written statements with AI for the defendant, and so just take these into court, and so you just have to submit them as your legal arguments. The AI could, it could even generate witness testimony. Because, by the way, like, prosecutors basically write affidavits for prosecution witnesses. This is something that I busted the prosecutor doing against me. The prosecutor, the witness was like misidentified basically, she said there's only one magistrate on the case. I forget if, I think she might have got it wrong as well. Anyway, and under discovery, I found out that it was the prosecutor that identified the magistrate on the case. That's why the witness got it wrong, because she was just verbatim copying what the prosecutor told her to say, which is not something you want to have exposed in court if you're a prosecutor, because it really destroys the credibility of the witness. I mean, I wonder what a judge would say, what would happen if a judge said to a witness, because, you can tell when, like, this guy I follow in the antiques world, and he's not that literate. He's, reasonably well spoken, but he's written English isn't the best. And suddenly he's put these little articles full of grammatical errors and stuff, and kind of a little bit colloquial with the language. And suddenly his articles became like, instead of 1 or 2 pages, they became like 15 pages long. It was kind of ridiculous. And perfect English. So you can tell that's AI, right? So imagine someone's in court, they're not very well spoken, and then they read out this witness statement, which is not like them. They don't speak like that, or even really think in such a sophisticated way. And then the judge says, or perhaps the person cross-examines them and says, "Did you write that, or is that?" Sorry, that they probably wouldn't put that. They'd probably say, "Did you have assistance from AI generating that statement?" And the person would say, "Yes, I did." But I stand by, this is what I think. I don't know. I don't know what a judge would do in that situation. But I'm just saying, like, you could start a law firm, a paralegal law firm, and compete and undermine existing law firms. And so potentially, I don't know if you could turn it into a monopoly, because it's hard to see. This is the other problem. Like, it's a potential monopoly trying to compete against an existing monopoly, right? Because of the way the law is regulated, you can't Like, I could represent people in court because I've been to court so many times, and probably do a better job than some lawyers because I've seen some shit lawyers in court. But I can't because of regulations that exist due to not having a law degree and so on. So, and this is like what you see in the building industry. You can't just go and, like, I can't have someone pay me to go and change the hot water cylinder out because I don't have a plumber's ticket. I don't have an electrician's ticket. I don't have business insurance and whatever else you need to do that. And so this kind of creates something like a monopoly in construction because now you have what would have been a very large number of people competing for the business turns into a very small number. And although there are a lot of independent contractors within that, they kind of work as a de facto monopoly because they charge very high rates. And so I think the law industry is a little bit like that. You get lawyers charge a cheap lawyer is like $500 an hour. So you kind of have like a semi-monopolized law industry. And now AI is coming along and trying to compete. With science, like, science is like very unregulated. You know, like you don't need a degree even to go work as a scientist. This is another topic, but there's no like Hippocratic oath or judicial oath equivalent in science. So consultancy work is, like, for real consultants, pretty vulnerable for people like me, but a lot of consultants are hired because of who they know. I know this is how it is, especially in the US. It's all about getting connections to people with money and power in the world of science. So, you know, a good consultant might be someone in the startup world who knows a bunch of venture capitalists and a bunch of CEOs and has a lot of very wealthy connections, you know, and they might not even necessarily be that good at like science, but people, you know, it's like people will pay $1,500 or whatever to have lunch with a politician who's giving a talk, right? Or more, $1 million if it's like the president of the USA. So that's it's actually the bigger part of scientific consulting, in my view, at least in the area that I'm in. But then you have all of these like political consultants in different ministries. Like, see, we're going to have, they say in Tasmania, 2,800 public servants lose their job. I don't know if I should say consultant, but like, let's say an employee who's kind of like in an advisory or policy role. I guess that would be public servants. So those people who are like getting a lot of information from online and writing a lot of reports, they're like, I would say this is why it might be fairly easy to sack those people now, because AI can do a lot of what they were doing. I mean, I did this big report on a big study into feasibility of wood-fired electricity. Feasibility study. Now, if I did that same study, what, you know, took me hours and hours would only take, a tenth of that time. So anyway, how does all this relate? Is that a form of monopoly? Like, does AI kind of get a monopoly on, like, public servant work? And if it does, like, how does it end up making money from that? Because ChatGPT is free, basically. But then again, like, and people say, I heard someone say, like, they won't be able to monetize it. But that's what people thought about all these news websites that used to be free, like all the newspapers, News Corp, New York Times, Guardian, all those websites used to be completely free. Now they're all paid subscription only. And you know what? People pay it. I paid it I was meant to get just a month because, information is sometimes very important. But I ended up, it's just very hard to like unsubscribe. So I ended up on it for a year. It's $30 a month. So yeah, people will pay it. People pay it. It's kind of interesting though that just straight up Google Maps was never really monetized. I guess they have ads and stuff, but you don't have to pay to use it. A lot of these email clients are free. Although, you get sent all these promotional emails. I don't know if you end up, like, if those spam, companies sending you spam, if somehow Google makes money from that, like if it's a Gmail account, wouldn't surprise me. Now, if AI is about making information more widely available, I think, you can start off on the premise that Marxism would favor that and say that's good because we don't want people to be ignorant. This is what makes Marxism different from, well, as far as I know, all other political ideologies. You want people to be educated. Marxism encourages people to read. And other political movements, even Labour. I was watching a shocking video by a local Labour MP the other day. They kind of minister to this idea, oh, you don't need to, think about it too much. They're trying to minister to what they think is common sense. Sometimes it's even on a religious level. Like, people think God would never create a world where we could kill ourselves via too many carbon emissions. Oh, it's just common sense. It just wouldn't work. So Marxism just rejects all that and says you have to be analytical, fact-based, not dogmatic. And so AI, if it's... See, there's no T in AI, right? There's no T for truth. But then again, can AI really work if it's based on falsity? I have a feeling like the truth will tend to come out with AI. And you can actually I did a ChatGPT thing on communism. I ended up getting it to admit that its initial analysis was wrong. I said, you didn't even look at what happened in Indonesia in the 1960s, which was capitalism. 500,000 communists were killed. You didn't look at the success of eradicating poverty in China. Like, the initial analysis was just like something off some neoliberal or even conservative website. It was just garbage. But if you point it in the right direction, it does give you truth. And some people think they're trying to point it in the right direction, and the AI client will stick to its guns because the person's an idiot, and there is no basis to support the direction that they're trying to push it in. So if we assume that the truth tends to come out with AI, because that's kind of the point, even though there's no T in AI, it's kind of like inherently implied that it's there. So Marxism has to be in favor, I think, of AI. That doesn't mean it can't be used in capitalist ways that Marxism would be against. But that's true for a lot of things. So, like you don't say medicine is bad just because you have private hospitals, right? So I think so far we've worked out that AI is a good thing under Marxism, and that the labor theory of value says that the value of products of anything produced with or partly with AI has to come down. That means the price has to come down. So the price of a report, like you can buy, they used to sell these reports on like the, I don't know, let's just say the lithium battery market. And these reports would cost like $5,000 for a copy. Nowadays, I don't think those prices are going to be viable because you could just get AI to generate the same fucking report. You could pay someone like overseas if you really wanted to minimize your cost and say, look, I need you to use AI to generate a report. I want something with all this data. I expect it to run out to 100 pages or more. Instead of paying them $5,000, you might pay them $500. Probably less. So there has to be deflation. Now, if these reports are used by companies to make, say, lithium batteries, then a little bit the price of lithium batteries has to come down because the R&D cost is low. Now, we also maintaining the view that technological innovation results in lower profits because there's less human labor being exploited, which is the only place a profit can come from. And so I don't think we've found anything that contradicts that. And there's nothing in Marxism which is against technological development. That's progress. That's how you improve production. So I think those are a few bricks of the foundation with regard to how to analyze this. I'm trying to I guess in the back of my mind, I'm trying to work out how do we arrive at a bit of a dystopian destination, because I feel like that's where we're going. So and this is a bit, going back to the Alex Mackay conversation, and we watched about AI, but I think the way he described it was like as a cat and mouse, or cat chasing its tail, or something. Like, you have innovation because you use innovation because you think you can make more money because you get a machine to do the labor of someone, and it's cheaper that way. But what capitalists don't understand, a lot of them, is that they don't understand the labor theory of value. And so labor theory of value always wins. And it's not hard to see, like company profits tend to get lower and lower as innovation. Like, it's just like labor theory of value always gets proven true. So yeah, but it's a cat and mouse game. Like, you can maybe argue in this very, very short term, you come up with a new way of making something really cheap, but you keep the prices the same as they were. And so, yeah, for a time you're making more money. But then eventually, as other people adopt the technologies, they can undercut you. And then, you have to compete. And then prices come down, then you're making the same amount you were before or less because you're not exploiting people's labor. That's why I say, like, capitalism has to turn to other areas. I think this is what was missing from Alex's analysis. Like, I heard once that the big supermarkets in Australia, they make on average 1% profit from everything they sell. These are huge, basically monopolies. There's only 2 big supermarket chains in the country. That's how low their profit is. This isn't like the Industrial Revolution where a worker was paid, I don't even know what it was, like a shilling a day or something, right? And they were earning like 50 shillings a day for the company in the goods they produced. And these factory owners became filthy rich. Even though these factories like weren't necessarily that huge compared to like factories today in China that are 5 kilometers long or whatever, right? And again, this all tracks with the increasing sophistication of how things are made, including food products. Most of these food products go through very industrialized processes with the packaging and the canning, and like the shelling of the peas to go in the frozen pea packets. Everything, like, it's all done by machines. So you tend to get less and less profit because there's less and less human labor involved. But capitalism then turns to housing and first of all, it kind of turns to monopoly, because it doesn't turn to, but it inexorably happens, and you get monopolized supermarket chains. So the profit is very low, but there are a huge number of stores all under the same company banner. And then you have like taxation, which is normally considered a good thing under under Marxism, at least in the socialist phase. A bracketed tax system is one of the demands, and we already have that in Australia. We have a bracketed tax system. But a lot of that tax goes straight back, instead of to social services, it goes straight back to big companies like the contractors who build the roads and the bridges. So a tiny little bridge costs like $2 million to build. It takes like 6 months, when China would get it done literally in 2 days for a tenth of the price. And so a lot of government money just goes, tax money is just going, so that's money coming from workers, especially since we have a GST, which is a tax on everything. That's something that Lenin wrote about in a book called To the Rural Poor. So the bracketed tax system becomes a way of capitalism getting money back for big corporations, because you used to have like state-owned road building and road maintenance organizations, but not anymore. We used to have a state-run bank. We used to have a state-run company called Telecom for phones. Down here, we still have state-run hydroelectric, and we still have state-run television channel, but that's non-commercial. And then you have a lot of money going to military contractors. Huge, especially now with the submarines and shit, like hundreds of billions over the next 2 or 3 decades. So yeah, capitalism gets, it taxes the worker. The workers may be like not being exploited that much if the company's not making a ton of profit from their labor, but then they get fucked over with tax that they don't get back in social services. It goes to bullshit military spending and bullshit, because these road and bridge contractors are huge. They're like multi-billion-dollar companies, some of them. I forget the name of those. Some of them on the share market. What are they called? I forget. And they also get screwed over by landlords if they're renting, as I said. And interesting thing about that is landlords are often people who just own 1 or 2 investment properties. Most landlords own less than 5 investment properties. I'd say probably even less than like 3 or less. 3 or less. But if you're getting screwed over by a landlord, it doesn't mean anything to you whether they own 1 rental property or 100 or 1,000. Like, it doesn't really matter to you in terms of the theft of your wages if it's just 1 guy with an investment house, or whether it's some big corporation owns it, right? So this is the danger of small capitalism, or the petty bourgeoisie. And because there's always a temptation by revisionists and social democrat types to like compromise. They always talk about the 1%, the 1%, the 1%. So someone who's just a landlord is not going into one or 2 investment projects. They're not going to qualify as the 1%. But what they're doing still has a big impact on the tenant. So, you got to take these things seriously. Now, how does AI affect housing? Because that's like one of the major. I kind of want to go back to like, how does AI affect inflation? because I feel like inflation is still pretty bad, even though AI should be pushing the cost of goods down. Here's the thing, if information is promulgated by AI, and we said that that's one of our assumptions, that it will tend to put out the truth, then more and more people will become cognizant of the ephemeral nature of the value of fiat currencies, like the Australian dollar. As more and more people become aware of the ephemeral nature of fiat currencies, more and more people will try and buy gold and silver or platinum or whatever, or anything tangible, land, you name it, collectibles that have some kind of value, like Rolex watches, shit like that. And so those things will tend to increase in value, increase in price, because the currencies are decreasing in price, because AI is causing people to lose confidence in the value of currencies. I guess you could argue that, well, all that information was already available. I feel like AI, another thing I think AI is doing is it's challenging the so-called inefficient market hypothesis. The inefficient market hypothesis says that the market fails to establish proper value sometimes of commodities or equities, anything that's traded on the market. So some like free market people will say the market's never wrong, right? Shit like that. It was glib statements like that, but actually it's wrong all the time. So the inefficient market hypothesis is true. And so you will get companies with valuations that don't make sense. They can be either too high or too low. It can go either way. And for investors or traders, this is very important, because if you can get in while something is wrongly priced, then if you believe the market, and if the market does correct, then you can make a profit, depending whether you're long or short, whatever it is. As more and more information is made easily available through AI, it will be harder for inefficiencies to exist in markets. And by the way, no one will be using AI more than the trading servers of Goldman Sachs and people like that. In 1995, Goldman Sachs had 50,000 servers dedicated to algorithmic trading. That's how big, and that's kind of an AI in and of itself. It just doesn't generate results that are made to look like they're written by a human. So I think what we're seeing with precious metals now is the inefficient market disappearing. So it was always kind of stupid that platinum was as cheap as it was. It was, for years, it was at just a price, it was way cheaper than gold. It made no sense. So what my analysis here says is that platinum probably pretty quickly will get driven up in price to its a price that reflects its fundamental use and scarcity, which is makes it far more valuable than gold. So, there's a novel prediction from this analysis. We'll see if it comes true. With silver, it's a little different because silver is not as useful as platinum, and it's far, far, far more common. But it did seem like silver was a bit, or quite undervalued as an antiques dealer, and seeing like how cheap sterling silver items were, which would have been really special when they were made. Yeah, it was clear that silver was undervalued. And people are saying it's all been driven by demand, but I don't know. I don't think that it is. Because there's been a deficit for a number of years, allegedly. I don't know how this deficit idea really makes a lot of sense, considering that you have dealers who have like multiple 1,000-ounce bars that no one wants to buy. But I think that AI is kind of like promulgating the truth of the value of commodities. And see, with stuff that's traded electronically by like institutions, you don't need like Tom, Dick, and Harry, member of the public, to learn about what AI is saying, because these trading firms are motivated and they have far more capital to throw around. Vast majority of trading volume is by institutions. So there you have it. Inflation you're going to get price correction in commodities that are traded by institutions. Yeah. Now, with tangible commodities like gold, silver, copper, iron ore, whatever it is, those have like an intrinsic value, which is pretty non-subjective. With companies, the value is always a bit more subjective. Unless perhaps it's a mining company, but like if it's a company that makes something, well, now you got to kind of know what the economy is going to do, right? Like the value of companies is normally based on forecasts. So AI would have to be very good at forecasting what's going to happen with economies. And, time will tell if it proves to be accurate at doing that. If AI gets it wrong, you might it might actually create inefficiencies in the market. I mean, that's actually why, because like computer-driven institutional trades are sometimes getting it wrong. That's why you get companies that are under or overvalued. Like that's actually pretty old. So, that is AI, where it's prone to getting things wrong, creating inefficiencies. So you could argue AI will create a more volatile market and tend to cause things to like scream up in value if it's feeding, like, what's the term, irrationally exuberant opinions to trading computers. And then, reality hits, and it all comes crashing down. And vice versa, you could get companies pushed down to very low valuations, and then they come back up very strongly. So, yeah, increased market volatility, perhaps. I think there's a lot more to flesh out with that, though, because I don't know that the AI has to be motivated to get things right, given that it can achieve a positive outcome by getting things wrong, depending which side of the trade. Like, if AI can fool most of the people, and people can make money from that, well, that might be what tends to happen. So AI-driven trading might tend to cause very big players who control the AI to create stock market crashes. So, but you won't, predicting exactly when they bring it down will be very, very hard. And by the way, that's not meant to be a comment on current valuations of NVIDIA or anything like that. I don't think AI itself is a bubble. I think it's going to it's basically like the internet version 2, in my opinion. So Google version 2. I mean, even it's beyond that. Like I'm finding it quite useful for searching for things online, even though it does get things wrong. It doesn't always put in caveats that, this statement is based on this assumption. So yeah, like, I forgot what I was saying now, but yeah, it's not in a bubble, is what I was saying. It's going to be ubiquitous. It's like saying Google was in a bubble when it never was. Doesn't mean that there aren't going to be companies that, if people talk about the dot-com bubble, the dot-coms took over the world, right? It was never really a bubble. It was just that there are some companies that were on the share market that were overvalued. And in the end, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's kind of ancient history that some of those companies went bust. Like, and if some of these AI companies go bust, it's not really going to change. AI is not going away. So, one thing I was thinking about, like, will AI tend to wake people up politically? Because the establishment only survives because of maintaining ignorance and making sure people don't become politically educated. So you might see, like, governments try and sort of get in between AI and people so that they maintain the ignorance. And then there's also the issue of, like, people becoming saturated with information. can people really, no one, people point this out in other videos, like no generation has ever had to deal with this amount of information before. And it has a lot of negative psychological effects. So I don't know that, like, just because people can be educated by it, that they will. I mean, you could say that about the internet, but you still have some pretty ignorant people. Like, I'm always amazed when, like someone, like, what is a LEFO? Like someone doesn't know about something that's going on. Something that they very could have easily Googled and they never did. I'm guilty of that from time to time. But, I'm more, for the sake of this discussion, I think, here's the thing about gold and silver prices, like, if those, and, other metals, if those are being driven up, people kind of pay attention to that. Like, it makes mainstream media stories, headlines from time to time. Whenever gold hits a new high, there'll be some article about it. And that's when people start questioning, what is my fucking currency really worth? And now that it's going up, like, very rapidly, I remember paying like less than $1 a gram for sterling silver. It's now worth $3.33. Like, in less than a year, I think it's more than tripled. It's probably gone up almost 4 times. Although I was getting a little on the spot, so let's say it's tripled. And instead of like people wanting to sell it, they're like, something's not right, and they hold on to it through a sense of fear. And other people are now buying it at $3 a gram or whatever it is, $3.30 a gram, Australian. And then people thinking, well, what else should I be buying? How much money should I really have in my bank account? And so I think, and they keep trying to cut interest rates down here. They can't, because inflation keeps coming back higher than expected. But okay, so let's say, I mean, what is inflation? Inflation, by definition, is like a gradual loss of confidence in the value of the dollar, right? So let's say inflation really does stay high, and it's AI is like propping up inflation. Well, at the same time as people losing their jobs, you're gonna have like stagflation, right? Like, you could have nasty inflation at the same time as high unemployment. They're going to sack 2,800 people in Tasmania from the public service in May. So that's what they're saying. So that's out of a population of 575,000. That's the kind of thing that's coming up. All these Western governments, state and federal, they're all in debt. Most of them are in debt. Norway's not, because it made a huge sovereign wealth fund from its oil sales, but Australia's not so smart. We blew it, folks. We blew the money on all kinds of stupid things. Tax cuts to the rich, military expenditure, overpriced contractors, and corporate welfare and shit like that. So, but then again, like, information enables production. So you can argue, like, all these people who get sacked, well, they can use AI to sort of train themselves. They can use AI to do things that they previously might have had to pay someone to do themselves. Kind of like the internet, like watching a YouTube video to learn how to fix your car, right? I know I've done that a few times. So I don't know that AI is fundamentally a bad thing. Like, it should ultimately improve production, spread information, make it harder to manipulate people. But at the same time, it is in the hands of capitalists. So they will always be they're always going to be like stuck in this tug of war, like trying to like manipulate people at the same time as they have to let the truth out, because that's what the system is. It's letting out the truth. And the great prediction of Marx is that revolution is inevitable. So that would, not to draw a long bow or anything, but AI pushing forward the advancement of workers only brings forward the day of revolution. So there's nothing inconsistent with Marx's prediction if we take the proposition that AI is good for educating people. At the same time, I feel like there's a lot of detail about what's going to happen over the next 10 years. I think that there are probably bigger reasons why countries are going to go into recession. People don't want to have children, for one. There's a lot of wasted talent in capitalist countries. I mean, look at me. I've got a fucking PhD in chemistry, and I sell shit on eBay. So you have inefficiencies like that. Loads of them. You got people driving Uber who could be doing something amazing, but capitalism doesn't want it that way. Capitalism also tends to push down the skills of people. It's another thing that Marxism teaches. Like, if you look at how they used to make files for like filing metal and wood, it was quite a skilled thing. All the little teeth in the file were cut in with almost like an engraving tool. They were back with a hammer. Every tooth was the result of one whack. That's why on old files, the teeth are not in neat rows. They're a little bit disorganized. Very old files. They're actually very rare. Rasps, I should say. So there's a lot of skill in that and in annealing and everything, but now it's just some guy standing next to a machine, presses a button, the blank rolls in, presses another button, something comes down with 100 teeth and just whacks all all the little teeth into place in one hit, presses another button, spits it out, someone else puts it in a cardboard box. Like there's no skill in that. So does AI also reduce skills? Yeah, it definitely does, right? You don't need to be literate now to walk into a courtroom with an amazing written statement. You don't need to be literate to write a grammatically perfect article about dealing in antiques on your website. So why bother becoming literate? I mean, why bother even writing anything? You're going to lose your skills, aren't you? If you never write anything yourself. So you kind of do get dumbed down, de-skilled by AI. Which means, guess what? You're an unskilled worker. You don't have to get paid as much now. You're an unskilled worker. Yeah, you might get that job working for a government department in policy, but any idiot can do that work now. So you're not going to get 120,000 a year. You're just going to get 75. Because any moron can ask ChatGPT to come up with some good, energy policies, right? So I think we can add that as another thing that's probably true. Workers will tend to lose their skills in areas touched by AI. And in the Western world, the Western world is not a manufacturing economy, is it? I mean, there is some, we probably tend to underestimate how much there is, but it's mostly a service economy. And, what about all these fucking analysts who work at hedge funds and stuff? These guys are used to getting paid a lot of money. All their wages can come down, right? Consultants like me earn less. I mean, it's funny, even selling shit on eBay, something that was hard to identify, and you had that hard-earned knowledge, which is that a skill, I guess, to identify things? Is that a skill? Now you just take a photo of it, run it through Google image search, and it will tell you what it is. It'll even tell you how much it's worth. What does that do? Creates more of the same thing being listed. Prices come down. People earn less money. Because now any moron can be an antiques dealer. It was already going that way. The only thing is with antiques, there's a scarcity premium. So sometimes it doesn't matter, if you needed AI to identify it, right? If you've got the only one on eBay, you set your own price. But those situations are pretty rare. Yeah, so again, that's a deflationary effect. I mean, it's kind of looking a bit disastrous if you have people on low wages as currencies are losing their value. I think you have to try and work out So the trouble with this stuff is actually quantifying it. Like, if you take inflation to its logical conclusion, you end up with hyperinflation, right? Like, fair country actually doesn't have any value. No more than the plastic it's printed on. And in a way, like, that is an example of the inefficient market hypothesis, right? People just haven't realized yet the money in their pocket ain't worth shit. So, hyperinflation around the corner. Might have to explore that one another day. But if you have a lot of inflation and a lot of job losses, that's thing is, I don't think AI, I think you have more like people getting lower wages is more like even like just epic job losses, because shit still, people still need, where are people employed? In schools and hospitals, right? None of those people can really, like, those places can't disappear. They might be able to sack at most like 15% of their workforce. That's not a disaster. People still need to eat. They still need to get their cars fixed. Shit like that. And there are always these interventions now. Now we're getting into neo-capitalist theory, but governments will step in with stimulus and shit. People have superannuation. There are all kinds of what neo-capitalism says is that capitalism has to protect itself by stopping economic crises from occurring, like we had with the Great Depression. And it's largely succeeded in doing that. It has to throw out some crumbs, It's better off throwing out crumbs and surviving than having a revolution. Thing is, though, you have a lot of really stupid people running capitalist countries these days. So, yeah. I should probably go to bed. I'm going to leave it here. I might return to this topic because I feel like there's a lot more to talk about. All right.